Hello out there and welcome to Public Conscience. You are onto the anti-corruption program produced by the Progressive Impact Organization for Community Development, PRIMOG. PRIMOG is a civil society organization working to promote good governance, participation, and accountability in Nigeria. I am Chidozie Obonnaya, and I'm with my colleague, Esther Bassi.
A warm welcome to the program wherever you're listening to us from.
On Public Conscience, we seek to evolve a corruption-free society through the amplification of investigative corruption stories by our partner media organizations and by alerting citizens and the government to their democratic actions against it. We equally promote integrity by promoting rare cases of the display of honesty by public and private individuals in the course of their normal activities. We appreciate the MacArthur Foundation for supporting the production of this program.
The discrimination against persons with disability is a global problem. A lot of world countries moved from discriminatory practices to an inclusive society for persons with disability. The 2023 general elections presented another great opportunity for Nigeria to create enabling environment for persons with disabilities to participate in the electoral process. Whether this opportunity was taken or not, it is left to be seen or to be interrogated.
Today's program is special, and we will continue to review the success, the frailties, and failures of the 2023 general elections concerning how persons with disability coped with before and during the elections. A few days to the February 25th presidential and National Assembly elections, an investigative report published by Wikitimes had raised alarm that persons with disability were being systematically disenfranchised in Niger State.
The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, had assured total inclusiveness for persons with disabilities, that's the PWDs, in the electoral process before, during, and after the 2023 general elections. Recall the 2022 Electoral Act introduced provisions for persons with special needs during elections, including the provision of suitable means of communication, such as Braille, large embossed print, electronic devices, sign language interpretation, off-site voting in appropriate cases, and those to assist the disabled to vote.
Today's program will audit inclusivity and the participation of persons with disability in the 2023 general elections. For you out there, what was the level of inclusiveness for persons with disability in the electoral process from what you saw? And how much of the equipment such as Braille, large embossed print, electronic devices, sign language interpretations did you see during the elections? And as a country, how does our inability to include persons with disability in the electoral process affect our development? Also, what must INEC and Nigerians do to ensure more persons with disability participate in coming elections?
Be ready to join us through phone and text messages during this conversation. The WhatsApp phone line to send your message is 0902 265 6167. That is 0902 265 6167. Please indicate your name and your location when sending your message. This number is for messages only.
Please begin to send your messages as soon as possible to 09022656167, and that is 09022656167. We will give out the numbers to call shortly.
If you just joined us, we are reviewing the inclusivity and participation of persons with disability in the 2023 general elections. Also, an investigative report published by Wikitimes 7 days before the commencement of the general election had indicted INEC of systematically disenfranchising persons with special needs in Niger State.
According to INEC, an estimated 19 million Nigerians with disability were registered voters in the 2023 general elections. And we will be joined on phone by a disability expert Chris Obiorabo by name. He will join us shortly to tell us more about this. And we'll also be joined by communication assistant at Inclusive Friends Association, Festus Sope, later on. Chris Obiora Abo, disability expert, is here with us. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Just to bring you up to speed, the focus is on the inclusivity and participation of persons with disability in the 2023 general elections. And so let's start off with a lot of promises to improve inclusivity. We are on the table before the 2023 general elections. How much were your expectations met?
First of all, we must appreciate the fact that issues of persons with disabilities are beginning to come to the front burner. We are so happy about that. It all started from when some organizations of persons with disabilities started engaging INEC. And as they're engaging INEC, first of all, came up with a framework on how persons with disabilities can actually access the electoral process. And when the opportunity for the amendment of Electoral Act in Electoral Act 2022 came up, persons with disabilities on their own part also make inputs, because the National Assembly, during the public hearings, made it possible for persons with disabilities to actually make input. And before then, we've been able to come together to articulate our views, and we're able to make input. And on that particular act, the section 54 of that act actually give right for, made it mandate INEC to make provisions for assistive electoral materials for persons with disabilities. So coming to your question, so some of it was based on the INEC framework and this electoral act that persons with disabilities engaged INEC, and a lot of promises were made. Okay. Some of the promises were to ensure priority voting, ensure that the assistive voting materials were provided. Materials like a ballot guide that will assist the blind to vote. Then again, the magnified glasses for those who have low vision, the persons with albinism, to help them to also identify the logo of political parties in order for them to make their informed choices while voting. Then again, the posters that they're supposed to place on the polling units to help the deaf persons to be able to actually know what is expected of them, because INEC argue that they don't really have money to provide sign language interpreters in all the polling units, because they have thousands of polling units across Nigeria.
Did they make that point?
They argue that they cannot provide sign language interpreters across the polling units. Okay. And for that reason, they decided to have election day posters. Those posters will be pasted on the polling units, directing people, especially the deaf persons, in order for them to know where to go for the accreditation, where to go for voting and all that. So those posters. So coming to your question, the posters, yes, we identified as a great number of the polling units have those posters. But when it comes to other assistive voting materials like the ballot guide, they didn't really meet up their promise on that. So we couldn't find most of those ballot guide in most of the polling units that were visited. Okay. Many number of persons with visual impaired, they complained that they couldn't find those materials in their polling units. And the magnified glasses, there also complaints about not having them. Then when it comes to priority voting, in some areas, persons with disabilities actually enjoy priority voting. But in so many other areas, they couldn't. And we attribute it to the elections couldn't really start early. Okay. So there was a whole lot of apprehension when they started. And that actually made the electoral officers not to be coordinated to actually allow persons with disabilities to enjoy priority voting.
Let me jump in here, if you allow me. Did INEC at any point complain that they will not be able to provide a Braille guide?
No, they didn't complain. They assured us that we are going to have this Braille ballot guide using their own templates, because they have where they've been able to identify the polling units where persons that will be using these materials are. So in their deployment, they were able to identify some of those areas. Well, though we know that their data may not necessarily be what it should, because we know that before now, like those who registered in 2011 and before the 2015 elections, there wasn't anything like in INEC column where you can identify you are a person with disabilities. So some of the people who registered at that time, you couldn't really identify where they are. But they said that they are going to deploy from EC40H, which they started deploying this particular form since 2019, in order for persons with disabilities to fill them in their polling units, for them to gather the data of persons with disabilities. But unfortunately, even in this election, most of us asked for this form, but these forms were not given to us. So going forward, we are not even sure whether INEC will be able to actually gather the data of persons with disabilities, so that in the future elections, we'll be able to now know how many persons with disabilities who are registered voters and where they are, and also to be able to also deploy these materials in order to cover all of them. But even in the areas where they say that they have been captured, that person with disabilities will be there. Some organizations that actually deployed their own observers also gave a report that even in those areas, they could not find those materials.
A lot of gaps there.
The materials were even seen in areas where nobody was there to use them. So it's just, we don't really know what went wrong, but we intend to also engage INEC, ask questions to understand what really happened.
Okay.
Right.
But they actually made this promise for presidential election, because the situation was worse during the governorship election. But we cannot hold them responsible, because they say they are going to deploy in presidential election. For governorship election, they never made such promise. But we are thinking that even in apply on presidential election, it's also going to be applied in governorship elections.
Okay, I'm just saying, but even in the presidential election, the promises didn't come to pass. But my colleague Esther is here, and she wants to ask you one quick question.
Okay. National Disability Act provides for the full integration of PWDs into society and prohibits discrimination based on disabilities. Do you think that this law has been obeyed so far, and why are culprits not brought to book in our clan?
I think what I would say is that it still boils down to persons with disabilities who have not taken the initiative to begin to now engage the process, or even to test the law by going to court. Because it's only when we begin to now test the law by going to court that we'll now begin to say whether the law is effective or not. Because the law is there. If you don't test it, you don't know whether you can guarantee your rights or not. So I would just take it for the fact that we persons with disabilities on our own part, I don't think some of us have been able to know when our rights are being violated, for us to even take the initiative of going to court to challenge, some of these laws. So that's the area that we would say that we have not gotten it right. But overall, I wouldn't say that we have done so good in implementing this particular law. No, nothing much has been done, but I will attribute it to enough awareness have not been created.
Okay. Because
some of the organizations, even within the law, the section 2 of that law actually mandate the Ministry of Information and Culture to create awareness on this particular law, and they are not doing that. It's only when the awareness has been created and people really understand that these are some of the areas they should they shouldn't violate that. When you do this, you have violated the rights of persons with disabilities.
So I think that's why the sector need you also. Sorry, Chris. I said that's why the sector need you also to come in and intervene with your experience and expertise. But let's quickly, as we begin to wrap up this conversation, because we have other elections coming up in the year, later in the year, and even by next year. So what kind of campaign will you be doing to educate more PWDs, persons with disabilities, and also what lessons must INEC learn from the 2023 elections that they just concluded, and as they prepare for future elections, what must they learn and take into the next election? If you can give me that in 1 minute or two, I'll be okay.
Okay, let me really start from INEC, because all I want to say is that INEC need to do more about the training of their ad hoc staff. They need to involve us in training of the ad hoc staff. They don't, because the way they train them this time around, we are not involved. There's no experts in disability organization that will tell you that he was involved in the training of ad hoc staff. They too need to involve us so that they know what is expected of them. And secondly, INEC will also need to do more in the sense of a distribution of this particular voting materials, because what we understand is that most of the adult staff don't even understand what some of these things mean or what the need for some of these things. So they left it in their bags. So they couldn't even deploy them because they don't even need to know what they are used for. So more training for the adult staff, and also more training for even the INEC staff themselves, for them to understand what is expected of them, because we too have seen a gap. So we'll be working with them more in order to address that gap. Then on the side of persons with disabilities, we've been engaging our people, talking to them to know their rights and know what is it. So most of them really, in this last election, they asked questions, and that was why we were able to identify these gaps. So we know that our people have been well informed, that we'll continue to inform them more, in order for them to know what is expected of INEC whenever they go to the police. But what we'll be telling them this time around is that is their right, because it's in the Electoral Act, and even the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Provision Act also have it, the Section 30 of that Act also give right for persons with disabilities to participate in politics. So it's their right, so they should demand for their rights when they go out there in most of the polling units to cast their votes. So they shouldn't think that anybody is doing them any favor. It's their right for them.
They should stand up for their rights.
Yes.
If you are to rate the inclusivity and participation of persons with disability in the 2023 general elections, what will your rating be on a scale of 1 to 10?
On the part of persons with disability, a whole lot of them came out to exercise their franchise. So I should give them an 8, because they all tried themselves to come out to. But on the part of INEC, let's just be fair. We should be giving them like 4 over 10.
All right.
So I was expecting
4 over 10 is being fair.
Yes, it's being fair, because we are totally disappointed by what happened.
All right.
So we weren't expecting that, because we engaged to the highest level. Even the INEC chairman on several occasions had meetings with us. Okay. So we never expected what we saw, because some of these things were also displayed before him. And he also made mention of issues of disability in the Chatham House. So we expected that we would have been more accommodated this time around, but it never happened.
Okay.
But we still believing that more will happen. We still just believe that there is a gap between those in Abuja and those that were in the field.
Okay, we must thank you so much, Chris Obiorabo, a disability expert. Thank you for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts. We appreciate
thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Bye.
If you just joined us, this is Public Conscience, and we've been talking about inclusivity and participation of persons with disability in the just concluded 2023 elections. And we just had an expert, lay bare his thoughts out there. And
he mentioned a couple of things that was quite touching for me, because at some point he said that the persons with disabilities are not aware of this act. And I begin to wonder, if there's so much gap, communication gap, how would they even begin to talk about full inclusivity and participation for persons with disabilities?
It's a lot. From what he said, there's a lot to be desired there. But he also acknowledged that they have their own problem, so they need to reach out to more people, more persons with disability, to be able to get them on board, to understand the what would I call it now? What their expectations, because you can only talk from the point of knowledge. If you don't know that XYZ should belong to you, there's no way you are going to make demands for it. So the way to hold government accountable, or any other government organization that is supposed to provide one thing or the other to you, is when you understand what they need to do for you. So, but we'll continue
call for more awareness.
Yes, call for more awareness. But joining us now to further this conversation is a communication assistant at Inclusive Friends Association, Festus Obe. Festus, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's quickly get to it as we are reviewing the inclusivity of persons with disability and their participation in the 2023 general elections. And I know you have a lot of experience as an organization, as someone working for an organization that is passionate with inclusion of persons with disability in the society. Okay, let's go on. What is your general impression of the participation of the PWD community in the just concluded elections?
All right. Thank you very much once again for having me. Yes, you are correct. At IFA, we do have experience with working with this community, because we have been at the forefront of ensuring increased participation of persons with disabilities in the political process of Nigeria. Going into the 2023 general elections, the IFA as a community, we are actually very excited, given the passing into law of the Electoral Act 2022 as amended. If you look at the Act, we discover that Section 54 of that Act, for the first time, expressly mandates the INEC to provide assistive electoral materials to ensure that persons with disabilities are able to vote. So this was historic for us, and we are very much excited looking forward to the 2022 general election. But our general impression of the election is that, even though we must commend INEC for ensuring disaggregated data in respect of persons with disabilities in the political process, which was also historic, because for the first time in the historical process of Nigeria, we were able to see that INEC has a disaggregated data that expressly provides the number of persons with disabilities who are able to vote or who have been registered to vote. INEC expressly provides the number of polling units that they are deploying assistive electoral materials. So this, we must commend INEC for this. But the general impression is that there were still enormous challenges coming out of this election, especially with respect to the presidential election, which we actually observed at IFA, because IFA was able to set up a data center that was made up of all PWDs, and we were able to follow the elections. What we discovered was quite not what we expected from INEC. First and foremost, the electoral officers in most polling units arrived late. So the implication for this for persons with disabilities is that, of course, if the polling officers arrive late, then it means accreditation and voting actually starts late. Then it therefore also means that in some polling units, the voting was concluded late. And for PWDs, it was not pleasant or for them to actually stay all through the process. Because what happens is that people become very restive, and then even the provisions for priority voting becomes difficult to enforce.
I'm going to jump in here, Festus. Sorry, forgive me. Was there Braille ballot guide? Was there all those equipment that INEC promised to provide during the elections. How many did you see while you monitored?
Yes, from our monitoring observations, we discovered that they were actually rare ballot guides, but the problem is not very much in the deployment, but it's also in the usage. Because in most cases, we discover that these materials would actually be in some polling units, but they will not be used, either because the polling officers are not equipped with the right information on how to elicit or prompt PWDs to use them. For instance, if we are speaking to data specifically, we discover that the brain ballot boxes was deployed in about 53% of the polling units we sampled during the presidential elections. But out of this, a negligible percentage was actually used. So there is still a gap between deployment and usage.
Okay. And enough of the let's say let me not call it lamentation now. We've noticed that there was gap and everything, but we cannot run away from the fact that there were violence in the election, and it featured, let me not say prominently, it featured well in the elections. How much did it affect the participation of persons with disability? And are you there?
Yes, I can hear you.
How much do you think violence impacted on the participation of the PWD community?
Very much, because we know that when it comes to volatile situations, persons with disabilities are one of the most immensely affected in any conflict situation or volatile situations. And then what played out, especially during the governorship and House of Assembly elections, where there are violence across the country, in most parts of the community, was that it actually made PWD not come out to vote. And then even the persons who were there to vote, they were much more concerned with survival rather than exercising their franchise. So in the end, it doesn't play well into the inclusive mantra of INEC to ensure an inclusive election.
Okay, I still have one or two questions to ask you. So we'll run a little bit faster now. My colleague is here to ask you.
Okay, so you mentioned some of the challenges that the PWDs, as persons with disabilities, faced during the just concluded general elections. I want to know, what are some of the improvements of the 2023 elections that have been missing in previous elections? What are some of the...
Yes, thank you very much. I think for the improvement, for the gain we can count on in this election is that at least now we have data, even though the data is not comprehensive, because it is way lower than the average or percentage when you compare it to the over 30 million persons with disabilities in Nigeria, and then you compare that we only have about 800,000 PWDs registered voters. So we still think there are still gaps in this area, but it's an improvement because we have this now, which we never had before. So we have real data that we can make reference to. So this is very much an improvement. And also now we do have from EC40EH PWD, and then we do have the written instructions now in these elections where even persons who are deaf can be able to know the election day procedures. So these are improvements. And then we do observe that in some polling units, INEC were able to probably listen to some of the advocacies we have been making in the past to ensure that there is accessible road to each polling unit, and then that polling units are placed, ballot boxes are placed on flat surfaces to ensure that persons who with disabilities are able to vote. So we can count this as gain.
Okay. We cannot. Sorry again, but we cannot end this program without your suggestion for on the way forward. If you can give me that in 30 seconds.
Yes, for us, suggestion for the way forward is that there needs to be much more training. INEC has to much more invest in the training of ad hoc staff, especially, so that for them to actually understand that where these materials are deployed, that they are meant to be used. Because we have occasions that even where PWDs demand, for example, from EC40H to be filled, some of the electoral officers will be the one making jests of the whole process. So it means there is still a gap in the knowledge gap between INEC officials. So we demand that there should be much more education in this regard. And also in terms of security, there should be more security too for PWDs to feel safer to come out and exercise their franchise.
Absolutely, there should be more training and security. According to the communications assistant at Inclusive Friends Association, Festus Obe. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. If you're still there with us, thank you for hanging in there. And you are on to Public Conscience, a production of the Progressive Impact Organization for Community Development, PRIMOG. And we have been interacting with communications assistant at Inclusive Friends Association, Festus Obe. He also complained of training of staff, INEC staff, and security, that those were issues that also, prevented them from participating fully in the process. We also hit the street to find out what Nigerians out there think about participation of persons with disability, and we'll ask them if they think the interest of PWDs as contained in the INEC guideline were adequately covered during the 2023 general elections. Take a listen and let's hear what they have to say.
Voices against corruption. Let the people speak.
Hello and welcome to PRIMOG's public feedback series on corruption, called Voices Against Corruption. And we ask, do you think the interests of persons with disability, as contained in INEC guidelines, were adequately covered during the 2023 elections?
Personal opinion, the guideline of INEC was not met because of the pocket of challenges we encountered during the election, because there was violence in many places. And how do you expect someone who is physically challenged to partake in such process and not being disenfranchised of their rights based on INEC guideline?
Well, I don't think there was a special place for people to vote. Even we that voted, we stayed under the sun. Just few people provided canopies for some people. I know that canopy can accommodate the disabled people, because people we have recognized for disabled, and if we see them, we'll make sure that they are comfortable than we, since they cannot stand as we stand.
The people with disability had no special treatment as per the last election, and their interest was not covered.
For my own polling unit, I know we had someone that has visual impairments. So because of the kind of crowd that we have, he was not given a preferred treatment until we spoke out for that person and he was able to vote.
Their interest is not covered, because even after the election, their leaders was complaining that they did not give them chance to vote, and they did not allow them to exercise their responsibility as a citizen of this country. So even if you look at it, we that came out and vote, our own interest is not yet covered. So we are complaining, as the disabilities ones are also complaining.
The disabled should be well taken care of, since they have agreed to that effect, that they are going to be adequately taken care of in the course of the election. Because they are, whether we like it or not, they are still part and parcel of us, and anybody can fall victim. So, maybe probably by the year 2027, INEC will need to, even before then, they need to really make sure they keep to their promises to give adequate attention to the disabled.
PRIMOG's public feedback on corruption in Nigeria is produced with support from MacArthur Foundation.
Voices from the street, Nigerians laying their mind on the participation of the disabled, the persons with disabilities. It's now time, Esther, for us to bring in our listener to join the conversation. You've been listening so much from our disability experts who spoke earlier, to Festus Obe, and also the Vox Pop that we played for you. You have to comment. This time for you to comment and have your say on all we've talked about.
All right, please follow us on our social media platforms at Official Primorg. The spelling of Primorg is PRIMORG. Remember that we are streaming live on Facebook at Official Primorg.
And remember that this program is interactive. The WhatsApp phone line to send your messages 09022656167. 09022656167. This number is for messages only. Please begin to send your messages now to 09022656167. And we'll open the phone lines shortly. We will be talking about the just concluded elections, and what is your general impression of the inclusion of PWDs in the just concluded elections? Did INEC provide communication gadgets as they promised? Okay, let's hear you. Not the generality, the inclusion of persons with disability. In your polling unit, did you see them given priority?
Yes, you see there is no permission for that. Even some people that are even sick, they even have their chances here. You understand? So plenty of people in disability, but sometimes some of the government, like a pregnant woman, some elderly person, we allow them to vote first. But if in terms of either, there is no preparation for that. I think so what they normally do, what is obtainable elsewhere, is that those people will have a special place to fit. You understand?
Yes, sir.
The INEC staff will be taking them one after the other to guide them and to direct them.
You didn't see that during the elections.
Somebody has been said find his brother has to vote because of people with disability. Everywhere was like a rowdy. You understand? People are aggrieved, people are satisfied because of the process, and there is no time for that. You understand?
All right.
In that the electoral act should be reviewed again, and I think appointing an NX chairman should be what we look into. Is the best. I think it's the holding all those things not to be affected.
Okay. Well, thank you for opening the floor for us. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, he said that a lot.
Streets, people are actually talking about, reacting to what they experienced, either directly or indirectly in their various polling units, because at the end of the day, it's looking as if that the guidelines concerning PWDs are on papers and not on reality. The provision, the assistance materials that INEC are supposed to provide for persons with disabilities are beautiful on papers. Then implementation is now another thing. This is consistent, it's persistent in our system, in our society, Dozie.
It's something not good. Call in and tell us if INEC provided communication gadgets to aid participation of persons with disabilities where you voted during the 2023 general elections, and how much do you think violence and vote buying affected persons with disability? How can citizens help in improving the inclusivity and participation of persons with disability? And what is your advice to INEC, because we have other elections coming ahead of us? But Esther, the big question is that when you get to a polling unit and you see someone who is disabled, who needs help, person with special need, do you even offer to help? Because I don't know, the Chris Obiora said that by the time INEC staff arrived late to the polling unit, that the whole place became rowdy, and in such chaotic state, you will not expect people to pay so much attention to persons with disability.
That's on the part of INEC. Logistics was an issue, but then look at it critically. It is there, it is stated priority voting for PWDs and the aged, right? So why is it difficult for us to implement these things, even though your polling unit is rowdy?
And a lot
Let's call a spade a spade. If you have something on ground, you have to execute this thing, follow it through. It's because we do not follow the process we set down That is why we keep having these difficulties and chaotic moves.
I recall that this election was said to have gobbled at least about 400 billion naira. So, and questions are being raised. People are asking questions. With all this money spent, did we get value for our money? Is a big question out there. And yesterday, a civil society organization also raised this issue, asking INEC to account for 400 billion naira spent on general election. Just take a snippet of what the concerns they were raising.
Okay, so CSOs to INEC account for 400 billion naira spent on general elections. A coalition of civil society organizations, CSOs, that monitored the 2023 general elections has requested the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to justify the sum of 400 billion naira spent on conducting the exercise.
Okay, with all these gaps, mentioned, and questions raised and all that, I think it's a very good time for us to sit back, for INEC to also look into how they conducted these elections and also get their house together, because as far as we are here, we must continue to have elections, and it's a good time to come and do introspection and also think of what to do in coming years, in coming months, because we are going to have elections very, very soon.
True.
Do you think it is even necessary to call INEC to account for the money spent during the general election? Call us and have your take, or you have your say this morning.
Not to take you away from the CSO's call to INEC, another point that Festus raised was the training of the ad hoc staff, as some of them were unable to use these materials provided by INEC for PWDs in their polling units. I mean, the time for training for the ad hoc staff, do you think it is enough for them to even begin to understand what the whole process of, or the job that is before them are?
The time of training, I think we had this election, we didn't plan it for 1 year. We planned it for over, they had 4 years to plan. So it's not like you cannot, no excuse will really suffice at this time, because you had time to plan, you had time to do a lot of things. And just like Chris said, where they told them that they cannot make room for interpretation, sign interpretation, yes, but they promised them that they will bring the Braille ballot guide, but which they failed. They didn't provide it in many polling units. So they're not telling us we don't have funds for it. So for the sign interpretation, we can tell them, okay, we understand, because you already said it have been issue that you cannot provide this.
So what happened?
To the others? A lot of things, a lot of questions that Professor Mahmoud
and
Yakubu have to answer or explain to Nigerians. We are not saying anything happened. But the big question is that as we look at improving our process, the electoral process, also there is need for us to, as human beings, be compassionate.
Okay.
All right, let's see who is here. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Barrister Paul. I'm calling from Abuja.
Okay, Barrister Paul, let's hear you.
Yeah. I feel that INEC owes Nigerians a very heavy explanation on why they did not comply to the Electoral Act. And then, coming to the judiciary, I don't know how they intend interpreting it, because it's going to form a very bad precedent in our electoral laws, whereby whoever the INEC chairman will be tomorrow, we now decide how he can pronounce a winner in outcome of any election.
Okay,
because Mahmoud has let us know that INEC on its own has the right to decide how to announce the elections.
Okay, Barrister, let me take you to what we are talking about. We are looking at the inclusivity of persons with disability during the 2023 general elections, and I'm asking you now, I'm sure you participated. Did you see all those facilities that help persons with disability to vote during election? What was the experience? If you can give me that in 30 seconds.
Sincerely, I did not take note of that.
Okay.
Because apparently there must be a very, there's a minority.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
But so you think that the INEC needs to do more?
INEC, we don't have INEC.
We have INEC, Barrister.
We do not have INEC.
We have INEC. You can say they have to do more. We are not perfect beings.
The institution has to be strengthened. It has to be strengthened. Once it's strengthened, you can now say that we do have INEC. We do not have INEC.
I agree with you that we need to strengthen our institution.
We strengthen the institution.
But we have
when
INEC.
the institution and they comply to the laws establishing them, then that is when we know that we have INEC. Then we can now think of how to.
But it's possible and it's doable. So let's keep hope alive.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling our phone line this morning. And Esther, a whole lot. We can talk about this over and over and over. You will not get to the end of it. A lot to be said. A lot desires not met.
Lots of trust in the system.
As far as we are concerned, we must continue to strive. Let's take this call, this last call. Hello? Hello? Yes, your name and where you're calling from? Your name, please. Okay. Okay, please, you have 30 seconds to make this contribution. Please go ahead.
Talking about disabilities.
Yes.
The process.
Yes.
With two like time, with the population, I need to try more. I need to should be more business.
Okay.
I mean, every time and like disabilities, they decide that right. So come and participate. This population, I didn't see much. There's no much facilities provided for them.
Okay.
To participate in the electoral process.
Okay.
And coming still on the other side, we should try much to restore trust on the side. That independence should be there. We are looking for a situation we can see electoral process now because of the political interferences.
Okay, Chidi. Thank you so much for calling us this morning. INEC should do more. A lot of the trust gap there, a lot of gap to be filled. But we must thank you so much for calling us, everyone that called us this morning. And it's been a great
it's
conversation.
time for us to go this year.
Esther,
please visit our news website, primorgnews.org. That is primorgnews.org. For all the details of our reports and interviews, visit our website, www.primorg.org, to get all the information about Primorg.
And you can watch our videos on Primorg TV, our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to get reminders when we have a new post. We appreciate the communications assistant at Inclusive Friends Association, Festus Obe, and also disability expert Chris Obiora Abo. Both joined us via the phone this morning. We thank you so much for joining us. Public Conscience has the support of John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. Get more information about the foundation on its website, macfound.org.
Join us again here next week for another episode of Public Conscience, and remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at @officialprimorg. I am Esther Bassey.
And remember that birth registration and birth certificate are both free if your child is under 18. Help stop the corruption in birth registration and do not pay for birth certificates. Also, remember that you can give us information or hint about corrupt acts through our phone at 090-2265-6167 or info@primorg.org. I am Chidozie Ogbonnaya. Stay safe.